maybe I should try this myself. This vegan diet, vegetarian diet that I'm on is not working for me. Let me just try it. And within like a week or two, I was like a new person. It was the first time in my life I never had abdominal pain. It was the first time in my life that I didn't have heartburn or all the other, the chronic fatigue, like the body, like everything that I had experienced for 35 years within a couple of weeks, just for taking out like the carbohydrates and the fiber out of my diet, which is like the opposite of what I was trained to do. I was like a new person. And so I've been eating this way now for like 6 years at this point. I had 3 babies doing it. I've nursed all my babies. And I still will I'm not a perfect eater. So when I do try to titrate some carbohydrates and fiber back into my diet, my symptoms always come back. So I'm somebody on the far end of the spectrum for low carb eating. Is like, I don't really tolerate hardly any carbohydrates at all. So when I say this is the way that I eat. It works for me, but I'm not giving nutrition advice. And I'm not saying that this would work for everyone. What I try to do is I try to be sort of like a vessel or a filter to help people intuitively figure out through the Holy Spirit what the best diet is for them and the best foods. I don't even want to say diet, the best foods for them.
Hey, yo, welcome to the Godcast.
Nothing is as it seems. Nothing. I mean, literally, nothing is as it seems.
We took authority for truth instead of truth as our authority.
The great deception is still to come.
Not every human you see is human.
A lot of us equate our value in life to the things that we have or the things we're able to acquire. And not the things that we're able to pass on.
But just sharing this story allows those people who are just starting out to recognize that there's somewhere to go.
Do you find solidarity within the differences, or do you find division within the similarities?
And it was a battle for my soul.
Worship in a mosh pit.
It's not if you buck means the gospel. What's up now?
Welcome to Godcast,
the Goodness Over Darkness podcast.
Here's your host, Emmanuel Kingman.
It's showtime. What is going on, everybody? Welcome to Godcast, the Goodness Over Darkness podcast. I am your host, Emmanuel Kingman, and here with me is Gammy.
Yep, Grammy's here.
Yes, she's holding Ezra. If you're watching the video,
and he was such a good guy. We're in the interview.
Yeah. So today's episode, we had on special guest Kathleen Lopez or Katie. She is a Patreon member. She's a friend of the show. She was friends with the show long before she was a Patreon member. She's also donated to the show quite a few times, a good sum of money. So without her, we definitely wouldn't be able to have done some of the things that we've done. So special shout out to Katie. I'm glad that she wanted to come on the show because she is a dietitian. So, she didn't pay whatever to come on the show. She did that because she appreciated what we were doing, and we've done some work together. She was a client for a little bit, and she is a dietitian, and we haven't done anything with nutrition on the show yet, so it was an honor to have her on the show. And this is the first show where we are now ambassadors for the Food Forest Abundance Program. So everyone can use our special code GODCAST, and the link will be in the description where you can go get your blueprint to get your food forest.
Start your own food forest.
Yeah, and so I'm so glad that it linked up this way. That this is the first episode that we're sponsored by anybody, and it's about nutrition. And this episode is about nutrition. So make sure you guys go check all that out. All the links will be in the description.
It's an excellent interview. I loved everything we talked about today.
Yeah. So we want to thank you all for coming out, with all of the different podcasts and content that there is out there. It is very appreciated that you guys are here listening to us. We would like you to like, comment, share, subscribe, rate, and review, whatever it is you can do on whatever platform you're listening to this or watching this on. It would greatly help the show grow And if you want to become a Patreon member, just go to patreon.com/goodnessoverdarkness, and you can gain more access by doing new, if you become a Patreon member, you can do things on there that you can't anywhere else. So make sure you go check out our guest website, which is rhythmnutrition.net. Go to our Instagram, which is at rhythm_nutrition3. Check her out there. Go to my website, emmanuelkingman.com. And if you want to sign up for the Bible study, send me an email with the subject Bible study. And stay tuned at the end of the episode for the outro. And without further ado, here is Kathleen Lopez.
Welcome to the Godcast. Cross up on my back, I'm slaying demons. It don't matter what you call that. Searching for the truth, facts are facts until they fall flat. It's looking like a story, man, it's all cap. But it's goodness over darkness, it ain't all bad. I'm at my maker, but I was called back. Emmanuel, show my people they're under a spell. Heaven or hell is free will. I made my choice and now it's well with my soul. I pray the same for you as well. Welcome to the Godcast. Welcome to the Godcast.
Hello, everybody. On today's episode, I have on a guest with some oddities in her family lineage. She is a mother, dietitian, and a woman of Christ. She has devoted her life to helping others and is here today to do just that. Everyone, welcome Kathleen Lopez to the show.
Hey.
Welcome to the show, Kathleen. How are you?
Thank you.
Do you want to go by Katie or Kathleen?
You can call me Katie. I usually go by Kathleen in I switched over to Kathleen when I got my first job as a dietitian because I couldn't get anybody to take me seriously because Katie is kind of like a younger person's name. So I switched, but I go by Katie in my personal life. So Katie is just fine.
And Katie, she is a Patreon member. We've had a lot of discussions over Zoom and Instagram over months. She is a wonderful person, and I am very excited to have her here. And if anyone's watching, you can see Mimi is feeding our grandson.
Glory.
Yeah, so you may hear baby noises from time to time throughout the episode. But Katie, do you want to give us a little bit of background about who you are and why you're here today?
Sure. So I found your podcast after watching the podcast you did with Matt Ryan's on. So that's how I found you guys. And then I continued to listen and I was just intrigued. I felt like there were so many synchronicities between your stories and your background and myself and what you guys bring. It really helps me with my spirituality. So I love that. I love that you guys have brought me so much peace in my own life. And I feel like given me so many answers to so many questions that I've had forever. So I noticed that you didn't have anything on nutrition on your podcast yet. So I thought, well, maybe it would be helpful for me to share my personal story about diet and nutrition on your podcast, since so many people have questions about diet and nutrition. And it's, at least for me, it was really hard to get the answers that I needed. So I'm always praying that whenever I provide information or have a conversation, that the Holy Spirit can come through instead of working from like a place of ego or right and wrong or knowledge base, that the Holy Spirit can really come through. But I didn't always practice that way, and I didn't always really understand that. So that's kind of I would say like a newer realization that I've had. And so I can kind of get into my childhood and my background a little bit, if that's a good.
Yeah, we'll get there in a second. I want to thank you so much that you came on here and said that what we're doing here has helped you and brought you peace and answered questions that you may not have gotten throughout your life with the church and things of that nature. And that is really, what we're here to do, is to try to figure out the truth. We don't know the complete truth, and all we can do is really just look into things in different ways and expand our minds. And that's what I've done so far. And I'm glad that you have this nutrition understanding that you're bringing here, because like you said, we haven't gotten to it yet. And it's not that I've avoided it or anything. It's just, the opportunity hasn't arisen yet. So obviously the Holy Spirit has put us in touch here today so that you could be the one to do it. And the way that we first got in touch, I didn't even know it was from Ryan Zem's episodes. But yeah, if anyone hasn't listened to those episodes 50 and 52, they're two of my favorite episodes that we've ever done. And it's like 6 hours.
And I still love following Ryan Zem.
Yeah, he's great.
Incredible.
Yeah. So if you guys haven't checked that out, go check out episodes 50 and 52. But the way that you first messaged me, I thought that I was like, no way this is real, because you were telling me about John Dee being in your family line and orphan trains and so much. And I was just like, no way, this isn't real. And then we've gotten to know each other.
Super Grammy. Caught it.
We've gotten to know each other over the months. And I mean, it's just incredible. So yeah, go ahead and get into your story a little bit.
Yeah. So I grew up in Iowa there's 4 kids in my family, and my parents actually met at, it's so weird. I'll get into this later too, but my parents met in Washington, D.C. They were both in school there. My dad was in law school and my mom was in graduate school there. And they met, and then they moved us back to Iowa and raised us in Iowa because that's where my mom grew up.
What law school was your dad in?
The Catholic University of America.
Oh, of course.
And that's where my mom was too. So they raised us in Iowa. We had a I loved our childhood. We ran free. It was a really small farming community. So I always tell people, like, there was no, like, Walmart is kind of a good, like, point of reference for how big a city is. There was no Walmart for like an hour away.
No dollar stores, no Walmart.
I don't even think we had dollar stores. I'm like older than you guys by probably 10 years. So I don't even know that. I don't think we had, though. We had a store called the Pomida.
You do not look that old.
And there's no way you're 10 years older than me.
I'm
10 years older than Todd, so.
Oh, okay. So you and I are similar in age then, probably. Yeah. So we had, we ran free. My parents would just be like, see you later. And we would come home when the town whistle blew. So we were just never home. We rode our bikes, no helmets. Like, we swam. We did a lot of sports were really big. So I played softball, was a huge sport where I was from. I did swim team. I did basketball, track, and volleyball. And so that was like, it was like this very wholesome upbringing, playing sports, very Catholic. Like, we had to be in church every Sunday. Both of my parents were from very Catholic families, very devout. We had, my great uncle was actually a priest who was he was a priest and a psychologist with a PhD in psychology. And I have a couple of his books that I'm digging through right now. But the university that he was at forever, my brother actually went and played football there when he was in college. But when I was growing up, there was a lot of childhood trauma and a lot of dysfunction in our family because my mom was working all the time. She was a nurse, and she actually went back to get her nurse practitioner when I was a teenager. So she was just working really hard to provide for our family. And my dad was sort of struggling with where he was at because he had grown up as an orphan. So he was suffered like really extreme neglect and abuse, probably that we don't even know most of really what happened to him in his childhood. So he really struggled, and he was working a lot too. So it was like a really sort of dysfunctional environment for the 4 of us. And then on top of that, since when I was born, I was always sick. So I always had stomach issues. And my mom said that I had this very flat affect as I was breastfed. I was vaginally delivered, but I was always sick as a baby. And then that carried on into my childhood. So my whole life, I have been in a lot of pain. I would have really bad headaches and really bad abdominal pain. So because of my background in sports, and then because I was sick all the time with abdominal pain, I got very focused on food. So I was always trying to like heal myself and to feel better. And my parents I remember they would take me to the doctor all the time. Like, my dad would always take me to the doctor. I was super close with my dad, and he was very protective of me. And he would always be like, we need to take her to the doctor. And my mom, the nurse, was like, she's totally fine. Like, when your mom is a nurse, you just like never go to the doctor ever. You could have a severed finger or, and they're like, slap a Band-Aid on it and you're fine. Take Tylenol. So that's how I grew up. So my dad would always take me to the doctor and they would never find anything wrong with me. But what I was experiencing was very real. And the doctors would always say, this is a psychosomatic issue and she just must be really stressed. And then they would take me to a psychologist and the psychologist is like, she's totally fine. Like nothing's wrong with her. So I did that literally my entire life, would be in and out of the doctor's office, just not feeling well ever, until I figured out how to switch things in my lifestyle when I was 35. So this was like 5 years ago.
Wow.
I finally figured this out, but it was like 35 years of just constant suffering. And
Wow.
it was, so it affected every part of my life. It affected my relationships, my performance, and all of the different things that I was performing in. Sports, like my sisters were really, really awesome athletes, and I like wasn't as good as them. And I think partly because I just never felt good. I couldn't perform at a high level because I never felt good. And then because of my like obsession, or I guess like interest in food and performance, and also I had a strong interest in medicine because a lot of the people in my family are in medicine. I went to college. I like, what I tell people is I ran away from home. Like my home environment was so difficult that I just wanted to get out of there. So I'm like, I'm going to the biggest Division I school that I can find that has my degree, and I'm going there. And I did, and I ran away. So I went to Iowa State. It's got like 35,000 undergrad, and I did not do a lot of studying there. I did a lot of running away from home.
A lot of partying, getting away from the Catholic lifestyle.
Totally. Yeah. So I didn't really, I never got into drugs, but it was a lot of like partying and drinking. And to the point that when I started having kids myself, I'm like, I don't really think I want to have girls because I'm lucky.
Must be a common Catholic theme.
Oh, totally. Yeah. Well, and I was like, I mean, as far as safety goes, like I'm really lucky that nothing happened to me over all those years of the partying and the drinking. And
Well, was it luck or was it blessed?
oh man, I was totally blessed, 100%, for sure. I mean, I'll tell you another story if we have time during the podcast about something that happened to me when I was living in Denver, that I was really just had a guardian angel for sure, looking out for me. But yeah, so I went to college, and then after college, I put all my stuff in my car, and I went to graduate school right away after that. And then after that, I put my stuff in my car again, and I moved to Denver, Colorado, and I was there for 6 years. I went there without a job, and I was able to get a job, and then I stayed there for 6 years, and I was at like the best pulmonology critical care hospital in the whole world called National Jewish Health, which was also super interesting for me because I was like sort of immersed in this Jewish culture that I knew nothing about. Like I had never met anybody who wasn't a Protestant or a Catholic, even all the way through my undergraduate and graduate. I only knew people who were of the Christian religions. And it was a learning experience for me when I met like non-denominational Christians even.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, so that was interesting. So a lot of my really good friends at National Jewish and in Denver, I had a lot of Muslim friends, a lot of Jewish friends. And so then I really started thinking about religion and about God. I always really wanted a connection with God, but I couldn't quite get it. And then I started wondering about the way that I was raised in my culture, my religion. And then I had all these wonderful friends who were not Christians. And I just remember thinking to myself, like this whole thing about what the Catholic faith or the Christian faith teaches about being saved, it just didn't make sense to me at all,
Right. Yeah, I totally get what you're saying, because they say if you say words, then that's okay, and you can do anything else, really. And it doesn't matter as long as you say the words, and it's not that at all. And it's so much deeper and so much more expansive than that little box that they try putting things in, because in all honesty, they want to be able to sin while just telling people like, oh no, I believe in Jesus. I don't think I need to live like him or that I need to act like him at all. I think that I can just go around doing what I want, but as long as I say the words, then that's okay.
Right.
And that's the furthest thing from the truth.
Yeah, and I've had these conversations a lot with Christians, is like some of the most wonderful people I know, who have treated me with the most kindness and acceptance and throughout my life, that I really needed at that time to like pull me out of a bad place. One is my dog, my dog Pork Chop, but two is people who were not Christians, who weren't raised with that. And I don't mean to offend anybody, but it really to me is like an indoctrination. That they weren't raised with that cultural background or the religious dogmatic beliefs that I was raised with, but they were like the most wonderful people. And that to me is truly like what a Christian is, my definition, my personal.
Right, a person of Christ.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And when I look back on like all my Catholic schooling and, having to go to church and all these things, yes, it is indoctrination type stuff, but I'm also very thankful that it introduced me to so many things that maybe somebody that goes to public school or something isn't ever introduced to, or, or of a different denomination. So it was nice to have like a baseline, I guess, of Jesus and of all of the things that come with biblical studies. It was nice to have a baseline of looking back.
Yeah, well, it could work in numerous ways of how it affects people, because a lot of people turn away from it completely and then they follow astrotheology or they follow numerology or they get into Buddhism and think that they're God themselves. And it's, it's a whole list of things can happen, but for you,
I agree. And the we rebel a little bit as girls. I went to all girls high school, Catholic high school.
Wow.
I rebelled. As a senior, I was a pregnant girl in the school, so it was like very taboo.
Oh gosh.
So I agree with you when you say that you rebel, and I lost my train of thought because you cut me off, but but I do agree with the rebelling, and I do agree that when I look back, I'm just thankful that it was at least present, because it didn't have to be. And I have other siblings that didn't have the schooling that I had, and I can see a wide gap difference in our current behaviors, our current lifestyles, our everything. I can see that for some reason this benefited me.
Yeah, it could. Like, I mean, there's so many different ways it can happen. Like my daughter's mom, she was in the same situation Mimi's saying, going to an all-girls Catholic school and being pregnant as a senior, and now she's a heroin addict in Philly somewhere, living on the streets. So it doesn't really matter where we are or how things happen. God guides us to where we're supposed to be when we're supposed to be there. And I didn't have Christ at all, and now I know Christ extremely well. So it doesn't really matter how we get there, but I can see that it was beneficial for you to have that baseline understanding, because I wish, now looking back on it, I wish I would have had an understanding of Christ. That's why I try teaching my daughter to have that personal relationship. I try getting her to read the Bible herself and make contact with the Creator herself. And in doing that, it has really benefited her, and she's matured very quickly from doing it. So
I remembered what I was going to say. Like, I did rebel, and I did do a lot of study in tarot and astrology and all of these different things, because it very much interested me. I was very much interested in, if you look through my library of books, it's like talking to dead people, angels, tarot, psychics. I just really wanted to know more, but I was kind of looking in the wrong direction,
Well, that's because the church
Kinda.
they put it in a box. They
tell you no, and you're like, I'm doing that.
Oh yeah,
I'm doing that.
definitely. Yep.
Yeah.
That's so interesting. Yeah.
So, Katie, did you want to continue on with your story?
Yeah, and so I actually I had a lot of peace with going to I just stopped going to the Catholic Church like I would say a couple years ago, mostly because we have had 3 babies in 5 years, and I'm just it's I'm tired. And it's really hard to take 3 little kids to church. And I'm nursing, so I don't really feel like nursing during Mass either. But the Catholic, and I'm at the place now where I try to, and I don't always do this, but I try to, just like Mimi, you were saying, like, there's what is meant for evil, God will make for good. I truly believe that if we let him. So I try not to just with like diet has been this huge learning tool for me with spirituality, because we can make everything black and white, wrong and right, but really like everything's kind of in the gray area. And for the most part, it's dynamic too. I'm always somebody who's always, I try anymore not to take too firm of a stance on anything, because I find that I will get some more information from the Holy Spirit, and, like, do a 180 or change how I feel about that. And then people are like, wait a minute, I thought you thought this. And so I always anymore, I try not to take too hard of an opinion on anything. But the Catholic Church brought a lot of benefits to, it was like the 1 hour a week where we could be as a family together, and there was no screaming or fighting or like violence or chaos. So for me, I always loved being in the church, and I loved being in Mass because it was like the one thing that was peaceful for me. And then my grandma was very, very devout. So she would say the rosary at least every day. So I grew up like there was rosary beads everywhere. And my grandma and I, who was Margaret Jean,
Another Margaret.
Yeah.
Oh, God bless you.
So she would pray the rosary over our family a lot. And we have this huge, I have 19 cousins. There's 19 first cousins just on my side. And we're all like, we're super close, all of us. We get along really well. And we've been like, had really good lives and been really safe overall. And we just always said it was because of all of her prayers, and she passed away last year. So I miss her so much. But I have like more comfort learning more about the Holy Spirit. And I watch a lot of NDE stuff. That's been like a huge coping mechanism for me. So I know that I'll see her again. I know that she's with us, always. But she was 97 and she lived a really amazing, incredible life. So she was like somebody who was always a place where I could go. I would go and stay with her when I was in college. Like her and I were like, if she would have been my age, we would have been best friends. Like she was.
Oh, that's wonderful.
She was so sweet to me. She just loved me so much unconditionally. And it was a love that I couldn't get from like anybody else in my family, really. And they did the best they could. And it's like, I've had all these questions from my parents and like resentments. And now that I'm a parent, I give my parents like so many passes because it's so hard. It is so hard. So they did the best they could with us, with what they had. And so that's another thing, is that I try to just see like what they were going through with all of their like generational trauma and everything that they brought. And just my husband and I talk a lot about like, we just want to do better for the next generation, the best that we're not going to be perfect, but yeah, like my whole point to that story was there was a lot of involvement with the Catholic Church. We were always in church. It was always like Catholic prayers everywhere. But it was like, it brought a lot of good to my childhood, and I'm not
oh my goodness
practicing right now, but yeah, so that's, I think I ended at, I went to Denver and I was meeting these people. But I was still really sick then. I was still really sick. And I was spiritually sick because my mom, she, when she was like in 8th grade, she goes, I just had the Holy Spirit just come over me in Mass one day. And I have never been the same ever since. And so she wanted that for all of us. And that was my expectation of what being close to God was. And I was so depressed for so many years and so frustrated trying to get that. I could never get that. And now I feel like I have so much peace, but it wasn't in the way that my mom experienced God.
Wow. So you had this idea of how God was supposed to come, and because it wasn't coming that way, then that led you into a depression.
I can totally relate to that.
Yeah, it's
Really?
these
Yes.
expectations that we get that aren't met, and then God surprises us because it's never happens the way that we think it's going to.
Right. There's a lot of people that have these big experiences and fascinating stories, and you're just like, well, I didn't get that. So I wonder if what happened to me was really that, I wonder.
Yeah. Well, and I was bringing with me too this chronic illness, and I was always in pain. So there was like something in me, whether it was from, I wondered, like, now that I know, if it was like the first time I heard the word transmuting was from Todd, actually. But I wonder if that's like one of my jobs in this body that I'm in on this earth during this time, is to transmute something that happened, because I was always in so much pain and like nobody could ever help me. And so, and then it was like, I basically was told it was my fault all the time. Every time I would try to get help, they're like, oh, you just need to go do this better, or this different, or like get your head screwed on straight. Don't be so stressed and whatever. As a small child, I would never say that to my kids, like I would do anything I could to make them feel better. But, I felt that maybe God didn't love me. Like that was not that I was even conscious of that, but because I was in so much pain all the time, I was like, I'm not good enough to feel good. Like I'm not loved enough, and I'm not good enough to feel good like other people feel, because I couldn't go to birthday parties and like couldn't eat the other food that people were eating. I was bloated and had abdominal pain 24 hours a day for my entire life until I was 35 years old. So it was a really, really, and I would pray and pray and pray and pray about it. Like, God, please help me. I don't want this anymore. I don't want to live this way anymore. And all this education, all these doctors, and like nothing could help me.
Well, so this was just from the foods you were eating. Nobody ever thought that maybe to change the diet?
No, so like the way that I grew up is we would have like cereal for breakfast, and then we would have like sandwiches for lunch, and then we would have fruit all the time around us. And then for supper, my mom would make like hamburgers or chicken or spaghetti, like Midwest. And we would drink, like I remember we would drink a lot of Kool-Aid during the summer when mom was at home, and we would eat like macaroni and cheese. And then we didn't really have junk food in our house, but all my friends had junk food, so I would go there and eat their junk food. And then when I was like, so I had a lot of really difficult personal circumstances happen with a relationship that I was in my late 20s. I ended up moving to Europe and working in Europe for a little while.
Oh, wow.
And then I came home. I moved back home after that whole thing collapsed. And I was working outpatient oncology at one of the major academic centers, Northwestern in Chicago. And I was working outpatient oncology there, and I was feeding little kids through their veins. That's another specialty that I do. I feed people through their veins or through tubes. It's a special certification dietitians have. And I was doing that in the pediatric population and the adult population. And it was just like, I was coming out of this like super hard personal time, like basically having to start my life over, moving across the ocean back home, starting this new job. And it was like if I had to do it all over again, I probably wouldn't work oncology at that time, because you really have to be like spiritually and mentally, emotionally strong to work with cancer patients, especially pediatrics. Like it was just something that I was not prepared to do. And so I did that for a year. And during that time, when you're working with cancer patients, a lot of times what happens is you'll like project that onto yourself. So a lot of people who work in those areas, they think I have leukemia or I have a brain tumor, or they'll sort of like, you're always afraid of that happening to you because it's so terrible. And so I was feeling the sickest I had ever felt in my life. So I was like, let me just go on a vegan diet. Let me go. It's probably
It's okay.
Go ahead.
Good lungs, Ezra. So I was like, let me just go on a vegan vegetarian diet, because that's what's recommended in all the cancer literature, is that it's protective against cancer. And so I did that, and I had never been more bloated and just felt worse than I'd ever felt in my life. So,
Wow.
So at that time, I had some functional testing done with not like a conventional medicine doctor, but a functional medicine doctor. And my lab work came back and it showed that I was diabetic. And I was like, I can't be diabetic. I was like, I've always been lean and athletic and I eat right. And, there's no way that I'm diabetic. But I was. So at the same time, I was working with this one doctor who's now a super close friend of mine. She was a radiation oncologist, and she was giving low carb and ketogenic diets to all of her patients. And so all of the dietitians that I worked with, like, would just be so mad at her all the time for giving diet advice, and they wanted to be the ones doing it. And they did not, most dietitians do not want anybody eating a low carb diet because of our indoctrination that we're taught in higher education. So Dr. K was giving all of her patients who were like breast cancer patients, ovarian cancer, women's cancers that are really tied to metabolic disease. She was seeing success with giving these low carb and ketogenic diets. So I've always had a super open mind. So I was like, let me just hear her out. Let me just hear her perspective on this and why she's doing this, instead of like attacking her and having this cognitive dissonance like all these other dietitians. Like, let me just hear her out. And I also, like, one of the things that really made me want to listen to her was that she was so kind. Like, she was such a kind person. So that's always like a foot in the door for, I feel like, anybody is kind of like, where are they coming from? Like, she just has the most amazing heart and soul. And like, she's such a wonderful person. So, and she's like wicked smart, super, super smart. Awesome. Like, also, she does Ironman triathlons, has had 4 kids, like, unbelievable.
Oh,
wow. So she started educating me and showing me what she's doing and showing me the science. And so I started digging into it. And then I'm like, okay, well, maybe I should try this myself. This vegan diet, vegetarian diet that I'm on is not working for me. Let me just try it. And within like a week or two, I was like a new person. It was the first time in my life. I had never had abdominal pain. It was the first time in my life that I didn't have heartburn or all the other, the chronic fatigue, like the body pain, like everything that I had experienced for 35 years within a couple of weeks, just for taking out like the carbohydrates and the fiber out of my diet, which is like the opposite of what I was trained to do. I was like a new person. And so I've been eating this way now for like 6 years at this point. I had 3 babies doing it. I've nursed all my babies. And I still will, like, I'm not a perfect eater. So when I do try to titrate some carbohydrates and fiber back into my diet, my symptoms always come back. So I'm somebody on the far end of the spectrum for low carb eating. Is like, I don't really tolerate hardly any carbohydrates at all. So when I say this is the way that I eat. It works for me, but I'm not giving nutrition advice. And I'm not saying that this would work for everyone. What I try to do is I try to be sort of like a vessel or a filter to help people intuitively figure out through the Holy Spirit what the best diet is for them and the best foods. I don't even want to say diet, but the best foods for them.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, because we are so different. And like you were saying, so many people go vegan and vegetarian and it's really good for them. But for you, it wasn't good. But for you, the low carb and the keto was very good. Mimi had same thing with her.
Yeah, I was just saying today that, it really, everybody has something different unique that works for you. And so you can't really push one, I don't even like the word diet, but you can't push one diet to every person because every person reacts differently to different foods. It could be the sugars in the foods. It could be the flours. It could be the gluten. It could be anything,
Yeah.
So it's very hard to push something. And when I quote unquote cheat, I can tell, just like you can tell, I can tell.
Yeah.
I can tell the bloat comes. I can tell I don't feel as good. I do know that eating low carb for me has reduced a lot of back pain and inflammation that I was having, and pain in general.
Yeah, for me, it was getting rid of sugars, just cutting out, especially sugary drinks.
Yeah,
and just not eating sugars, and doing the the intermittent fasting. When I was intermittent fasting at my peak 2 years ago, I would eat like 2 full meals within an 8-hour period, and that's all I ate in that day, and that's how I lived my life for a few months. I mean, I was lifting more weight. I was stronger. I was leaner. I could run faster. I had more energy. It was like just eating in this time period, which was hard to get into the habit of, but eating in just this time period, and what I would eat was like chicken, rice, different things that were going to be digestive friendly for me.
Yeah.
Those types of things that really had me on the best path that I've ever been on. I was someone who was 280 at one point, and I lost 30 pounds within a month by just cutting out sugary drinks.
Wow.
Yeah, no more soda, switch to water, switch to G2 Gatorade, which is sugarless Gatorades. The packets that you put in the water bottles that have no sugar in it. I lost 30 pounds in a month by being a truck driver, cross-country truck driver, driving 10 hours a day and not exercising. I lost 30 pounds in a month. So little things like that, simple switches can be greatly beneficial. And now for Lent, I have given up potatoes, breads, and pastas, and that's hard for me because that's like all my
Let me
foods.
tell you how it started. He wanted to go no carb, and then he was like, "This is too hard."
She told me no grapes, no rice.
And I'm like, "Yeah,
no
we can't
apples.
have grapes, can't have apples, can't have bananas, can't have any of those things." And he's like, "Never mind. I'm just gonna cut out this, and this."
Yeah.
But still, it's a big change. It really is. And I don't mind the swap outs now. In the beginning, I was like, zucchini noodles, cauliflower, but now I love it.
Yeah,
I love it.
Well, so I've also switched because I was a big potato chip eater, or crackers, the little things like that. So I put them to the side, and I've been eating nuts, and especially doing this detox cleanse. It was detoxing me. I could feel everything just detoxing. I'm less bloated, less gassy than before. Like, I'm not putting in these carbs, and it makes it harder to snack because I'm not someone who wants to go to nuts all the time. So I'm like, like I'll get like trail mix or something, and they'll have raisins, and I'll be like, okay, like that's I'm vegging out today.
Your diet is so funny, Todd. That's hilarious. So you were just eating junk foods and drinking pop all day, really?
And he was big potato, grain, pasta, bread.
And you didn't feel, your body didn't feel like, I would be so sick if I ate that way. That's why, and my husband eats like you do. And I just watch him eat, and I'm just like, how are you? Like, I would be laying on the floor so sick.
So when I got to be 280, this was way before Mimi knew me. When I was big, it was mostly milkshakes. I was
smiling.
Oh wow.
because I was a drug addict, so I would get high, and then I would go to McDonald's, get Shamrock shakes, or go to Wawa and get some kind of milkshake, and that's really what got me so big. And then because I worked at a food place, I delivered food, I would get free sodas, so I drink sodas, and I would eat like chicken wings. I didn't eat too much junk. It was just like the junk that I was eating.
You were drinking junk.
Were milkshakes. But even when I had become the truck driver, I wasn't drinking the milkshakes and all. So I cut that out before I became a truck driver, but I still didn't lose the weight until I cut out all sugary drinks. So yeah, I didn't. So when I just did for Lent, it's not that I was eating a ton of different snacks, but the snacks that I would eat would be, potato chips. And that would, so when I was doing the intermittent fasting, I could feel that, when you're bloated, you kind of like blow up a little bit. Well, I could feel that, these foods are inside of me breaking apart and, pushing me apart, but it's not that much food. And now that like I eat oatmeal for breakfast, with peanut butter in it rather than toasted butter or buttered toast, now I can feel that I'm much tighter in the morning, and it's makes a big difference.
Oh yeah, for sure. Definitely. Sorry.
I don't know if you guys agree, but I feel like I don't need like a scheduled breakfast, lunch, dinner. Like, I know people that have to eat like every couple hours on the hour. I am not that kind of person. I can by accident intermittent fast for most of the day.
Yeah, I'm usually 2 meals a day type of person.
I can go if you want.
That's one of the things I recently actually published an article in a nutrition journal about that, Mimi. So one of the benefits of meeting your nutrient needs with a high quality diet is satiety. Satiety is a feeling of fullness. And I noticed too, for me, when I switched to the diet that I switched to 5 years ago, I could go for really long periods of time without eating, which was a really new thing for me because I was always hungry before. Like, even though I was eating, I was still always super hungry. And then I was looking in the Bible about that to see what that said. I think there's like a verse, I think it's in Micah. It says you will eat and never be full or something like that. So the majority of people that I work with, and I think a huge problem, especially in the United States, is satiety. There's a problem of nobody's ever full and you're just constantly eating all day long. And that kind of brings me to one of the things that I wanted to talk about today is have you guys heard of the Minnesota starvation studies?
I have not.
Or study, I guess. So there was this researcher named Ansel Keys, and this was back in like the 50s and 60s. He was doing research, and there were like 36 people who volunteered to participate in the study. Now it probably would not like pass an ethics board. You wouldn't be able to study this now because it was so unethical and so unhealthy. But so he fed these, I can't remember how long the study period was, but he took these 36 guys in Minnesota and he fed them like 3,000 calories a day. And then after like a few weeks, he fed them 1,600 calories a day. And then he gave them like a refeeding period after that. So he was looking at the psychological aspects of starving is what the main outcome point of the study was. And these guys, there's pictures, they're like really famous pictures of these guys in the Minnesota. They looked like concentration camp people. Wow. They were so emaciated and so muscle wasted. And one of the ways that I do a physical exam on my patients to look for body composition changes and malnutrition. And one of the ways that we know how to assess this is based on some of the information that came from these studies. So this was in the 50s, late 50s, early 60s. And out of this, so what they noticed and observed during the study period was that when they were starving, they were depressed, they were obsessed about food. They had like a significant decline in sexual function. And I think heart rate variability was some of the observation points that they looked at. And so like I was looking at this study and I was thinking to myself, well, I see this mostly in almost all of my patients today. Even though they might have metabolic syndrome and be overweight, they're still displaying the same symptoms that they would if they were in starvation.
Wow.
And so like during this time when Ansel Keys was doing this research, he was doing other research too. He took some, he did another famous study at this time, and he looked at saturated fat intake. So saturated fat comes from animals. And then he looked at cardiovascular disease, heart attack risk. And he compared the two, and he associated with eating saturated fat that comes from animals with having heart attacks. He said that there was a correlation there. So because of this research, and then President Eisenhower had just had a heart attack at the time. So because of Eisenhower having the heart attack, and then this researcher doing these two big studies and publishing them, they became super famous. And these two studies are like the basis of every single nutrition recommendation even today.
Well, I just read something about that like 2 days ago, and you didn't even send it to me.
That's crazy. Wow.
It was talking about how the diet got to where it was because of Eisenhower's heart attack. That's wild.
Yeah. So like any nutrition recommendation you read now that's on Google, any mainstream, anything from American Diabetes Association, American Heart Association, any like medical, anything, anytime a patient goes into the hospital, they'll always get prescribed the same diet, which is eating like cereal for breakfast, fruit, eating like low fat, whatever, everything's low fat. So when you reduce fat from the diet, what is the result of that? You could probably figure this out. Just when you reduce fat, what happens? Like where
take away your energy.
You take it, but it ends up being high in carbohydrates. So it's really hard.
High in sugar too.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Exactly. So when they took the fat out of the diet, so basically they made meat and eggs like this big enemy. They were like, you'll still have like your grandparents and everyone will tell you, I can't eat eggs because they're high in cholesterol. So that was like a big thing.
That's what it was about.
They want
actually.
You to eat cereal, sugar and grain.
That's what I was reading about was cholesterol, that it's like some kind of myth that cholesterol is not actually something that's bad, being high in cholesterol, that they targeted it that way for reasons that you're saying, and they made people afraid of being high in cholesterol when it's not actually dangerous.
Yeah, exactly. And like, I would even take it further. I think when they did that, because when you demonize one ingredient, which they've done, everyone is afraid to eat meat and eggs now. Like I still have people, I have the sickest people telling me this every day that, well, I can't eat that because of my cholesterol. And they're all on a statin drug anyway. So like every patient that I see every day, like 99% of them are on a statin drug to lower their cholesterol. So when I started learning, so that was kind of my first gateway into like questioning everything that I had been taught in my life about the church, about like my education, like just like diet was my way of, I guess, like having the spiritual awakening, because I was so sick following the advice that I had been taught. I work with sick people every day following this advice. I'm like, something's not right here. And then I started learning about these two studies from this researcher and how the politician was involved and how the media, it was a political media thing. The politicians and media got a hold of this, and it immediately just became like this mass like brainwashing. And now nobody can eat intuitively anymore because everybody thinks what's healthy for them is what they say. Everyone says they to me. Well, they say this is like, do you even know who they is?
Right. Sounds like conspiracy theories.
You know who they are.
Yeah. And so this was like, 60, 70 years ago that this happened. And then when you now, there have been books written on this. One, Nina Teicholz was one of the people who wrote the book on this. It was called what was it called? Anyway, it was something about big fat lies, or I don't know, about fat, and how like meat and eggs were demonized. And it was really like a political media thing, which you learn everything else that's coming, into our reality here is about like the media and the politics.
Right.
And so I always thought it was this accident, this Ansel Keys did this, but now I've just had like these epiphanies, what I believe, and I could be wrong. I don't think that it was an accident at all. I think he was like appointed. I think like it feels very like Freemasony to me, like, so when you look back on the data, so when he looked at these countries, it was called the 7 countries study, when he correlated heart attack and cardiovascular disease with the saturated fat consumption, there were really 21 studies or 21 countries in the study, but he only published his data on 7 countries.
Right.
That's 6 line.
Yeah, it was 6 of them, right? He took all the other ones out of it, and it was just on this graph so that they would line up with. I saw this other.
Yeah, studies that look like the way you want them to look.
Yeah,
exactly. So, and when you look at medicine and when you look at nutrition studies, they all do that to some degree. Like it's, I don't trust any of the data anymore. So when I'm arguing about nutrition or about medicine or about like why I take a certain stance, and there are these people who like it, another thing with it too is like science is people's God, and it has been for a long time. And when I realized like science is not my God, when I realized that, I'm like, I don't have to practice this way anymore. Like I don't have to, there's this term like evidence-based. And like when we came out of school, there was like bumper stickers. I remember one year for National Nutrition Month, they wanted us to put bumper stickers everywhere and stickers that said, "Ask the dietitian, I am the expert." Just like really like just gross stuff like that, you know.
9 out of 10 dentists that we chose
Yeah.
said this.
Yeah. And you want to be the expert because you've just like, I mean, I felt like college, like I was in prison, like everybody was outside.
Make you mad?
Playing.
No.
Go ahead, you're good.
Everybody would be outside like playing frisbee, like the business majors would be, you know, and I would be doing like my 14-page biochemistry report and just feeling like I was in prison. And, you know, a lot of time and effort and money goes into our training and education. So we do want to be the expert, and we are taught that we are the expert. So it's really hard. Like I let that go a few years ago, and I'm so much happier now, but I still see like all the argument and like the remedy for the virus that just happened. That's like another, like totally anything that's polarizing that like these experts can, like, there's always going to be, I was listening to your podcast with the chiropractor lady who lives in Ireland, and she was so good. She was articulating everything that I believe. Like there's like all these experts and all this data and all this information, and everybody has their point, and like to the point that like nobody knows what the right answer is.
Right, because we're all so unique.
Exactly, and there is no right answer. Like when you can really sort of like understand that, but it took me forever to figure that out.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you figured it out, because there's so many different methods of awakening, because everything is perverted and inverted, that any number of fields can lead you to all these different truths. Because once you see the conspiracy in your certain field, then you're like, well, what else am I being lied to about? And it just opens more and more doors.
And the further down you get, there's this phenomenon like you were talking about where, you know, at first everyone has an opinion and their opinion is the opinion. And then you reach a point where
it all flips.
You don't really take a stance because you understand that facts change daily, experiences change you daily. Just all these different things can alter your opinion on anything at any given time.
And one of the biggest things is the character assassination. Like when I was waking up and I was trying to tell different people about, you know, well, this person said this, and they're just, oh, you're going to believe that guy. And it's just like, do you know that guy did this and did that? And then when I start looking at myself, I'm like, well, what do you think about me? Like, I was in prison, you know, like I was a drug addict.
That's why I love you guys, because you're so transparent. Like, I love your story, Todd. It's just, I mean, it's not like it's funny. It's funny to see like that's where, and you're so honest about it. Like, I love the transparency, and like we all have a history. We all, and we're still going to make mistakes. So, I mean, it's hysterical when you tell your story. Like, I know it's probably not funny to you, but it's like knowing
one day mine's funny to me.
Right. Yeah. Knowing where I am now and who I used to be, like I can see people can change. Like everyone, like when we were talking before about Kanye, I look at his stuff and it really, I'm like, okay, you know, I don't listen to his music or follow what's going on, but I can see how I couldn't reach those celebrities. So he may be doing things in a unique style that Jesus is leading him there to reach those people, because that's how he has to do it. Because I see how I have to do it. I see how others have to do it with their groups that I couldn't reach who he's reaching. Right. So I don't know if he's doing that or not. You know, I don't hold an opinion one way or another. I just know that I couldn't reach those celebrities and pull them out of those deep, dark depths and still try to function around them by being, you know, to be amongst a group of people, to be accepted as a peer, you have to still be in certain things. And there's just a way of life that, you know, these certain groups move about. So I don't know, you know, that's just an example about him, but like everybody, I really don't judge anyone, because if I'm a function of the heart and you're a function of the brain, well, we're going to be very different, and
Right.
if I'm trying to judge you based on what I'm doing, well, then it's not going to line up. But then again, the heart and the brain don't function the same. So we have to function differently. And once you get that understanding, and it's no longer the egoic, well, I'm the expert and you have to ask me because I know everything. It's now, okay, well, no, just ask God. I'll ask God for me, you ask God for you, and then we'll just celebrate together.
Yeah, exactly.
I like to pay attention when you tell people that you listen to the Jesus is King album. When you meditate, you're like, oh, I listened to Kanye's album. And some people, they just get stuck on the word Kanye and they don't know the albums. They don't know what it's about. So they don't even stop to consider that it's not the person, it's the words and the music, it's how it touches my soul, basically. So I love watching people's reactions because I can tell, like, you can almost tell what stage they're at when, if they kind of do one of those, like, oh, I'm not listening to this guy anymore because he listens to Kanye,
Well, it's interesting when I was on a podcast, it'll be on a few months in like September, it'll come out. But he was a little nervous about having me on because he thought I was a cult or something. And then he loved having me on. He invited me to this prayer group that they have. They were doing a Bible study. And that's where I learned that John the Baptist isn't the author of the Gospel of John. That's two different people. I didn't know that. But while I was in that prayer group, everyone was like kind of busting on him for talking about Jesus is King being like a great album to listen to. And I was like, yeah, guess how I learned about Jesus.
But it is, yeah.
Yeah. So it was just so great that someone he was judging me initially, and then he goes, you know what, the Holy Spirit's convicting me to bring you on, and I want to hear your story. And then we had so much in common, and it that's how it goes when we try judging things because of fear. God opens us up and he goes, nah, it's nothing to be afraid of.
Yep.
I have some questions.
Sorry,
go ahead. No, go ahead.
I think he knows our hearts too. So I think he knows, and I just feel like I've always had an extra layer of protection in my bad decision making because he always knew my heart. He knew that I was really always pursuing God.
That's a great way to put that.
Yeah. And that's probably why I was so protected for so many years with so many bad and not really living the way that I should have been for him,
So do you want to get into that a little bit? You had a little teaser early on about what happened in Denver. Would you want to get into that?
Yeah. So I had broken up with another boyfriend. And I was working like 5 jobs when I lived. So my 20s were all like work. I was working in a long-term acute care center. I was working in the ICU at National Jewish. I was teaching part-time. What else was I doing? I was doing like 2 other jobs at the same time. Like I literally had 5 jobs at the same time. Because that's another thing Irish Catholics do is they like work themselves into the ground. And I was trying to pay my student loans. So my 20s were like my friends would be skiing and I was working. So I was had broken up with another boyfriend, and I wanted to walk down the street and just have like a little dinner by myself. So I walked there. I was having my dinner, and this guy walked in with his girlfriend, and he sat next to me, and he was like chatting me up the whole time. And I was always like super naive. I still am kind of pretty naive, and his girlfriend's hanging all over him and she was super jealous. I looked back on this at the time and I was like, oh, she was really jealous of him talking to me, but I really don't think that he meant anything by it. I think he just felt sorry for me because I was by myself or whatever. So he's like, here's my business card. I have a business. I make granola bars. Me and my girlfriend have this business and we want to help kids. And so then like I had his business card. And I went home and I just was like continuing to work and whatever else. And I thought like one time I was like, oh, I should probably try to email him to try to like help him get connected to whoever, because he was really interested in children's nutrition. So, but I never contacted him just because I was so busy. And but I felt guilty for not contacting him. And then like 2 nights later, I was watching the news and he comes on the news and he's like, this girl had disappeared. And they couldn't, he was the last one that was seen with her. And so they're interviewing him and he's like, I don't know where she is. And he's like crying. And so long story short,
was it his girlfriend or another girl?
It was another girl, a different girl. Okay. So this girl had gotten really drunk. She was like 19 outside the bars in Denver, and she was like stumbling around, and they could see her on the cameras, like the different cameras in downtown Denver. And he picked her up and he ended up murdering her. He raped and murdered her. And he like buried her body, and they couldn't like find her body, and they couldn't like prove that it was him. But the stepdad of the girl like knew it was him the whole time. So he was like basically surveillancing him. Well, then the guy goes up to Fort Collins and he does the same thing to another girl, but he didn't kill her. She ended up living. It was like this horrific, violent attack on her. And she was in the ICU, and they got his DNA under her fingernails, and that's how they caught him. So then they caught him because of her, brought him in, and then he confessed to the first murder. And I was like, he was grooming me. Like I was on his list, you know? So like, had I not had the spiritual protection, the Holy Spirit, like blocking that energy, like I may have contacted him. And he ended up putting the girl like in his granola. This is so sad. Like he put the first dead girl in his cooler in his van in his granola bar business.
Wow.
And then like, it was probably like a month or two after that, I was running in a park, and like, again, the same neighborhood that I lived in Denver. And this guy like de-pantsed me. I was like, what? I turned around and I was like, what? And it was this little tiny short guy, and he was taking his pants off, and it was broad daylight. And I ran in this park all the time. So he ended up, I just like was very mean. And I was like, I remember swearing at him, and he pulled his pants off and took off. And those two events were like pretty near each other in like the period of time. And, so I called my mom. I'm like, oh my gosh. I'm like, what is going on? She's like, honey, why don't you move back to Cedar Rapids? Right. Like, so it was kind of like a scary time. And so like shortly after that, I moved back to the Midwest. And then I carried on with like my, whatever, but God protected me through so many things in college when I was impaired on alcohol. And that's why I'm just going to like, again, teach my kids different, teach them to be different. And they won't have the health problems I had. So I think they'll have like hopefully an easier time and like a better connection to God than I had, because I felt like so many things were always blocking my connection to God. And I would have been in different, who knows? I mean, my life is the way it has been, the way that God designed it. But it's taught me a lot about like asking questions, and like back to the nutrition piece here before I get down too far down that road. But so everyone's hungry, everyone's getting sicker, nobody knows what to do really, but it's all based on like this lie of this bad science that came out like 50, 60 years ago that we cannot get away from. Like everyone is just so like, their idea of what's healthy is based on this information, like total disconnect to intuition or making like their own choices about their health. And I see that every day. And then there was like another character in this story. So Ansel Keys, like if anybody wants to look up Ansel Keys, like super interesting. That'll teach you a lot about like the field of nutrition and in our country. And like there's a big interplay there with the field of medicine too. And like, it was like the early 1900s, Procter & Gamble actually like started the American Heart Association with like, I don't know how many millions of dollars. Procter & Gamble was the company that actually invented Crisco. So the same company that invented Crisco founded the American Heart Association. And so that's what
makes sense to me.
Yeah, totally. So like, that's the place that we're in now, is all of these mainstream nutrition guidelines are about like plant-based diet, eat more grains. The World Economic Forum is recommending that everybody get off meat. They want everybody off for the environment and the global warming, and like the cows are contributing all this bad stuff to the environment. So like basically in my experience, if it's a mainstream guideline in medicine or nutrition, it wasn't the best for my health. It's not the best for most of the health of the people that I see every day. Like, it would be helpful for them to not take that advice, because mostly everyone, we're immersed in this environment where we're eating according to these guidelines, whether we like really know it or not, because it's the food that's really available for us in our environment. It's affordable. And then the reason why I believe this happened, like looking back on everything, is because they knew that they could manipulate the global markets if they could control agriculture and the food production. And this is like non-satiating, super addictive food. You cannot binge eat like steak. You can't binge eat on butter. Like, those foods are too satiating. You just can't do it. You can binge eat on ice cream and Frosted Flakes and bread and like the sugary drinks all day long. You can do that. And then if you do that, you're addicted to the food. You're not full. You don't feel good. You're not healthy. You have no energy. When you talk about like the physical and mental, emotional, spiritual states, like they're getting us in that physical state. That's where they're getting us, right? They're getting us in that state because when they do, just like me in my childhood up until my 30s, like it was super hard for me to like connect with people, connect with God, and like not be so self-centered in my thinking because I was so sick and I was so feeling terrible. So like, now that we're into this this way of eating and this diet, and we're thinking that it's healthy for us, we don't even know what it's like to feel good. We don't know what it's like to have it. Like, we don't know what it's like to feel full. And we're thinking that like it's just normal for everyone to be on pharmaceutical drugs now, because if you eat this way that they're telling us to eat, you have to be on a pharmaceutical drug most of the time. And at least not just one pharmaceutical drug. Usually it's more than one pharmaceutical drug. And when you look at, I mentioned statins before. Statins are a huge, like statins and proton pump inhibitors are two of the drugs that I see prescribed on everybody's list every day. And they're not benign drugs. Like, they have a lot of really bad side effects. And like, most people don't need them. They don't need those drugs if they like, switch their lifestyle a little bit. And everybody that has a cholesterol level over 200 will be asked to be on a statin, like almost everybody. And cholesterol in the blood, it's not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing. Our body makes cholesterol. We need cholesterol. So like it's called the diet heart hypothesis, was Ansel Keys' hypothesis. Everything in nutrition is based on that now.
Okay.
So everyone is prescribed the same diet based on this diet heart hypothesis, but we keep the cardiovascular disease and everything has gotten way worse since we adopted this way of eating. And then the other character in this nutrition story, besides Ansel Keys, is this guy, and I told you a little bit about this before, this guy named, Henry Kellogg. Henry Kellogg. So we know the word
Kellogg's.
Yeah. So I can't remember what era he was in. He was like a little bit before, Ansel Keys. I want to say maybe 50 years before that. His story is crazy because he had in Battle Creek, Michigan, he like invented cereal. They're like, grain fell on this like belt and it burned.
Yeah, I read this before. I forget though.
Oh, come on. It's like how stupid it's like the other things that we like fire. It's like how stupid it's like, that's just so stupid. It doesn't make any sense. And then like this whole cereal industry was invented, and everybody that I see is everyone loves cereal so much. Like, people are so addicted to cereal. And
it's what feeds the parasites.
Exactly.
It's what feeds the sugar and the grain. I firmly believe sugar is the prime food source of parasites.
Oh, yeah.
It is, yeah. And so every carbohydrate you eat turns into a sugar in your body. So like, when you go on a lower carb diet, like it really starves the parasites, have nothing to live on. So that's why people, like when I went on to a low carb diet, I was probably experiencing some like die-off symptoms that I wasn't realizing that it was. That's probably yeah. So Kellogg was a really interesting guy because he was a Seventh-day Adventist. So most of the nutrition research is these big epidemiological studies, and it will say So they look at like super large groups of people over long periods of time. It's called retrospective data. They look back on them. So they'll look at like, how does for 50 years, how does a Seventh-day Adventist, they live longer, they have less cancer, less cardiovascular disease. So there's a huge just epidemiological body of data just on this religion, on these people in this religion. So when you look at like Loma Linda, California, that's a huge place where they live. So a lot of the nutrition research comes out of Loma Linda, and Seventh-day Adventists are like plant-based diet eaters. Many of them will remove meat from their diet because their prophet, Ellen White, this is another super interesting lady to look up. She like had visions from, she says God or Jesus or something, like very like real. She thought they were real. This person was telling her, the spirit was telling her not to eat meat and to do all these plant-based things and everything. So their religion, she is their prophet, and they are like really big on abstaining from meat, alcohol, tobacco. They do a lot of things really well. Like they believe in like sunlight and cold showers and community, and it's a Christian religion, even though this woman is their prophet. And I have friends who are in this religion, and they're like awesome, amazing, wonderful people. But they're like super indoctrinated into that meat, like anti-meat type of thinking that came from this prophet. And so most of like my point here is like, so we have Ansel Keys doing this, and then we have this religion. And when you read medical journals, a lot of the nutrition stuff is coming out of Loma Linda. It's coming out of these universities. A lot of the PhDs sitting on these like boards for nutrition are Seventh-day Adventists. So the research is like super, super biased. So like dietitians, when we come out of school, we don't know that we're being indoctrinated by like this bad data from Ansel Keys and this religion. Like really is what it is a religious base. It's not really scientific at all when we say that like these are the nutrition guidelines. And we think it's evidence-based, but it's really religious-based and
Right.
weak science. So Henry Kellogg was like this really strange, weird guy. I was reading about him the other day, and it says when he was at Battle Creek and these like sanitariums where hey Kitty
Thomas.
Hey Thomas, these people would go to these sanitariums when they had chronic illnesses to try to heal. And the like most famous one was in Battle Creek, where he was a doctor actually. That was where his sanitarium was. But he was like big into eugenics. That was like one of his like foundations. He was a eugenics doctor. When you read about what he wanted to do to sterilize people and the things that he recommended, it was crazy, really barbaric stuff. And then like part of the reason that he prescribed the like high cereal, like plant-based diet was because it would make people not want to, they couldn't get aroused when they were
right.
on diets. And that was another big thing in this religion, was that like they're very like anti, like you shouldn't be like, even a lot of the married couples will not sleep in the same bed. So they had like even like take the Catholic issue with sex like even further, and that's how these Seventh-day Adventists are. And so he had a thing with like fiber would basically make people have really low sperm counts and like not get erections, and so that's why he wanted everyone on these like high fiber diets. And I was reading that during his time at the Battle Creek Sanitarium, it said he became a Freemason. So I thought that was super interesting too. And I'm like, oh, he became one when he was there. Like, I don't buy it, but
right.
Whatever. I guess I could look into that a little bit further, but there's always that connection there with everything too. Like, I feel like, so that's where our information is coming from in the nutrition world. And that's why everyone's confused. Like you said, everything's inverted. Everyone's confused. We don't know what to do. And so I just always encourage people to like experiment and get in touch with your intuition, and keep praying about it, because you don't have to live like Mimi, you were saying you had a lot of the similar symptoms that I did. Like, you don't have to live that way. There's always a way for you to improve your health and feel better.
Yeah, and what I learned through my keto journey, I didn't even know what keto was, and then I'm like, oh, that's just another one I'm gonna try. It's just another diet I'm gonna try.
Yeah.
And I was very serious because I really wanted to lose the weight. That's what it was about for me. So I was very strict, and I tried to stay as close to zero carbs as possible, and did all the swap outs for it was about 2 years. And then I started to think like, well, I want an apple, and an apple can't be all that bad, and I want a potato. A sweet potato can't be all that bad. It's a vegetable. And I started to just sit and think, what have people always eaten? And what is stuff that we created? Versus what have we created? We created cereal. Well, then that's an obvious out, but we grow potato, they grow whole. So I'm not going to deny myself a fruit or a vegetable. That was my thing. It was like, all right, now I'm going to switch to low carb, and I'm not going to deny myself something that is natural sugar or natural carbohydrate. I'm just not going to deny myself that, but I'm not going to overdo it either. So I'm going to have a balance, and that has worked wonders for me. I like not refusing fresh local honey. I like not refusing, certain berries and fruits that they say are off limits. I don't care if it's a couple of carbs. I don't care if it's a dozen carbs, but to me, those are better for me and my body. And people have survived on these things for so long. Instead of me getting a cereal that's been stripped of all nutrients and then fortified with fake nutrients, extra fake chemical nutrients, I'm going to choose natural.
Right. And so as we finish up here,
I did want to ask her some questions, but go ahead.
Okay.
Did you want me to get into the John Dee thing a little bit and just like?
Yeah, but we'll get into that as we go out. As we are now experiencing the president of the United States claiming that the sanctions on Russia are going to create food shortages in America, is there anything that we could eat that would keep us filled longer? And, because as we might have to, be rationing food, is there any particular foods that will keep us full longer and that are nutritious for us?
Yeah, that's an awesome question. So just like the way that Mimi does her food choices, that is what I believe. And when I give when I give nutrition encouragement or information, is it real? Because like everything is fake now. So, and I also I have to give people the information that like if I give it to one person who is of really low economic status, I want to be able to. It should be the same for everybody, no matter what. So when I make everyone's like. I worked at a really super wealthy suburb of Chicago, and I would have all these very wealthy people, and they were like all buying organic food. And I'm like, well, I can't recommend that. I'm not like a big person supporting like the organic movement. What I do support is local and sustainable food movement. Like if you can grow your own food, or like we literally, our property is adjacent to a farm, to a grass-fed beef farm. And the guy has a farm stand. So he grows all these. I say it's like much more important to know your farmer and to get foods locally. So that will help, I think, with all of this. Like, who knows what's coming with all these things, but like, just like eating locally, we should have all been doing that anyway. And then the most satiating foods on the planet are foods that have protein and saturated fats, the foods that have been demonized. And again, like look at the Minnesota starvation studies. Like that was not an accident. Like, okay, these were the what he did to these people is essentially what's coming from the World Economic Forum and what's coming from our world leaders. They're putting us into starvation. They're making us hungry. It sounds so crazy, and like conspiratorial to say that, but that's what they're doing. They've been doing it for a long time. So if you can eat, like if you can get a hold of fish, meat, cheese, eggs. I mean, my husband, he's another like really good perspective changing teaching tool for me. My husband is my tool, a teaching tool. He grew up in Mexico with they didn't have a lot of income. He had chickens, he had pigs in his yard, and so they ate what they had locally. They didn't have a lot of grocery stores. And so he ate a lot of eggs growing up. He ate a lot of like whatever they could grow in their yard. That's what they ate. They ate it seasonally. So like my business is called Rhythm Nutrition because I'm really into the circadian rhythms. And so we should be eating locally and seasonally. Our food is really like quantized or matched to our environment too. So like when you're eating you're eating like bananas from South America in January in New Hampshire, that like, how is that a healthy diet? I don't know. You know what I mean? So like local seasonal protein, that's what I'm a little bit nervous about. I'm a little bit nervous that we're going to have an issue getting our hands on protein and meat.
What about like nuts?
I mean, nuts are going to be protein. They're not ever going to be as high quality protein because of the amino acid profile. But for some people, they may be. Just for me, I don't do nuts. They don't work well with my body at all. I do peanut butter. Peanut butter is okay for me, but like almonds and some of the other ones I don't do well with. But nuts are going to probably be more of a main protein source if what's coming is really coming.
And they want to feed us bugs too for protein.
Yeah.
That's and they've been they rolled that out almost a decade ago in baseball stadiums across the United States, MLB stadiums. They've been doing it, and they started in Seattle, of course, and because they want to invert everything. They are these reptilians that would eat bugs. Now they want to force feed it to us because now that they're part human, that they want to make us feel what it was like to be them at one point when they were just completely reptoids that had to survive off of bugs inside the earth. And that's why they want to make the synthetic beef, all the synthetic meats, have the synthetic sun, because they want us to experience what they had to experience, and they want us living underground essentially when we're above ground.
Wow, thanks for making that connection, because I still like really struggle. I've never heard you say that before, and I really struggle with like, why are they doing this to us? Like, why?
It would make
sense.
Makes
so much sense.
Yeah,
want because they grew up underground, and there's still so many of them underground that to come up, the sun would hurt them. The oxygen would hurt them. That's why they're depleting our oxygen. They want to get rid of the carbon dioxide because it's too rich for their lungs. The sun is too healthy for their skin. They need to pervert it and dull it down so that they can come above ground, and so that we experience what they experience. That's really, in my opinion, that's how it.
I think that's kind of how the food pyramid was created. It was kind of inverted and upside down. Like, eat all these grains and don't touch these butter. Don't touch the butter. Meanwhile, I'm eating like meat, butter. I mean, all that good stuff.
So it sounds like we should definitely get a cow, because I've been saying that for months now that I want a cow, and I think that's what we need.
I don't think we can handle a cow in our yard. But anyway, it would be totally cool, but I just don't think when it came down to the nitty gritty of having to collect and do certain things, I don't have those farmer abilities. But I love the idea of going to local farmers. I try to do that. I try to hit local farms. I try to hit the farmers markets where I know they're selling local beef or local-ish beef. I know it costs more, but I know it's more well taken care of and very paid attention to. The care is very personal. So I love that. But I do have a question kind of along the lines of Todd's peanut question. With the breads and grains that you can't eat because of your stomach issues, are you able to eat things like almond flours and coconut flours in place of that?
So I personally I don't do any almond flour. I don't do any coconut flour. I only I make myself a cheesecake every week, like a keto cheesecake. I use Swerve, and I'll eat that all week. Like that's my breakfast every day, is like a huge.
So what would you make the crust out of then?
I just don't use a crust. I just
I don't like the crust anyway, so I can live without it too.
Yeah. It's just easier. So I don't do any nuts. I'm just like super reactive to all of that stuff. And so my diet is as long as this is what I tell people, and like this kind of answers your first question about like how are we going to stay healthy with these food shortages. As long as you get your mineral needs met, your amino acid needs met, you need fat, minerals, and amino acids. That's what you need to live and to be healthy. And like another thing that they're trying to do is like make us weak. And that's what we saw in like the starvation study. Like they observed what happened to us when we're physically weak. It makes you mentally and spiritually weak. So that's why they're designing all of these things this way. But if you're like Todd was saying about intermittent fasting, if you meet your amino acid needs, that's protein. You get the fats that you need, the saturated fat, and the minerals that you need. All of those things are in meat. Meat is super high in potassium. Meat is high in much higher in the minerals than any of the plants are. If you get those things, you can intermittent. So even if you only have one meal a day, if you're eating 7 or 8 eggs in one meal, that will sustain you for most of the day. Okay. If there's like food shortages, most people can do eggs. Most people hopefully can do like meat or eggs once a day. I would say that would be your best bet for like staying mentally, physically, spiritually strong.
Awesome.
And sunlight, morning sunlight. So you need sunlight, you need minerals, you need amino acids and fats, you need sleep. So sleep and sunlight and all of those nutrition things, that's what you have to stay healthy. If any of those things are missing, like you can have the perfect diet. If you're not sleeping and getting sunlight, you will not be healthy. It'll be, that's what they do to you. When you're in college, they lock you in. Even with all of our jobs now, we're all locked inside in front of the computer, not moving our bodies. So that's the design of this like whole society, is not to make us strong.
Are you able to eat natural sugars, fruits and vegetables, or do you steer clear of those as well?
Yeah. So for me, I keep trying. I get really bad. Like my body's really good about telling me like pretty immediately. So I get really bad heartburn. I've tried berries. I can't do berries. What I can do are just white potatoes. So I'll do white potatoes and I'll do sourdough bread. Like those are the two, and dark chocolate. So those are like the 3 main foods that I eat that are not meat or eggs or butter or cheese. And I do fine on that. We had a friend my husband grew up with the Greeks in Chicago when he was there in the restaurants, because he worked in restaurants. And so they became his family. And one of his good friends, who is a pilot now, his wife called me and she was like, Kurt is like super sick with all these abdominal issues. And it was like exactly what I had, what you were describing, Mimi. And so I said, well, what does he eat? And he was eating like oatmeal with like flaxseed for breakfast and honey. And then he would have like greens for lunch with like a little bit of fish and like the heart healthy diet that we're told to eat. And so I said, okay, well, here's what may work for him. This is what worked for me and a lot of the people who experience these symptoms. And I said, how long has he been sick like this? She's like 20 years ever since I've known him. And so he went on, this new way of eating new foods. I told him, I go do butter, sourdough bread, do beef, like try to eliminate as much fiber and vegetable stuff as you can, at least in the beginning, and just see how you feel. And I was thinking, I'm like, you never know if you're hurting someone, right? So I was just praying. I'm like, God, I hope I did the right thing. I hope he's feeling good. And he would, like, when he was flying, he would have to like fly the airplane. He flies for a commercial airline. He would have to like keep running to the bathroom as he's flying. And it was like a really hard thing for him. And he was always miserable. And so he just like called me out of the blue, like 2 weeks after I had spoken to his wife, and he was like in tears. And he's like, I just wanted to say thank you so much. He's like, in 2 days, I was a new person. He's like, I have been suffering for like 20 years. I've been suffering. And he's like, I feel like my life is like, I'm on a different life plan now. He's like, I can,
I'm going to have you talk to my mom. She's been struggling with stomach issues since she was a little girl. And she tries to do different things. I definitely
think hers is a carb sugar issue for sure. For sure. I've been having this urge to I want to make, like overnight oats and things like that, but with steel cut oats, because I really like steel cut and I like that they're more nutritious, and I know they take a little longer, but I'm wondering if I probably will notice the bloat or whatever, but I also know it'll fill me up and satiate me for a while at the same time. So I'm not sure. Certain grains I flip-flop with. And then I was going to ask you what your opinion on, are there certain meats that you do not eat? Certain proteins that you do not eat?
So I can't do organ meats. I wish I could get into that because they're super.
No.
Yeah. Yeah. If you can do organ meats, they're really healthy. I have an aversion to most fish. So I grew up fishing with my dad and I would watch him clean all the fish. And I think that's why I don't like, even if I smell it or look at it, it's hard for me, but I will do like lobster, crab. Like I'll do salmon and tuna are fine for me. And then every meat I eat, I don't do much chicken because I grew up around like in Iowa where I grew up, there's a lot of like poultry processing plants and you could smell them. And like, I just know how they're raised and I know how they're processed. So to me, like poultry is not a super healthy option unless you're getting it from like one that you know that like chicken was like free ranging, which is really hard to grow those types of chicken. So to me, like my husband and I do a lot of fillets and I love ribeyes.
A lot of beef.
A lot of beef, yeah. And I grew up, my uncle's an Angus beef farmer. I come from on my mom's side, they were farmers from Ireland. So I know how we raise beef in Iowa. And the first time that I saw, like, I was like, what is everyone's problem with beef? Because I grew up around these farms where there would be like 100, 150 head of cattle. And they had these like great lives in the grass, in the barn, in the sun. And then when I went to graduate school in Oklahoma, I drove by a cattle lot in Texas and I could not believe what I was seeing. I was like, this is why people think beef is bad. There were like 1,000 cattle, like just like shoulder to shoulder. Yeah, it was crazy. And I'm like, this cannot be healthy, right? Like, so that was like a really like profound realization for me that this is why beef gets a bad rap. But poultry, the way that they're raised, even if you get like organic from the grocery store, it's not like, and I always say like, if you can go to the butcher instead of the grocery store, definitely go to the butcher. It's probably like 15 to 25% more like per pound for all the beef, chicken or whatever. But my husband and I, like, that's one of the places that will like put a little more money.
I swear it tastes better. You can tell.
Oh yeah. Well, and like you're supporting a local business and they're cutting the meat right there. So I was asking my uncle one time too. I was like, Uncle Tim, he's like my Irish uncle who does the beef cattle. I was like, what's the deal in New Hampshire? Like the beef doesn't taste the same as it does in the Midwest. And he said, it's even when we would make a roast in the crock pot, it would be like all hard and it just would not have the flavor. And I'm like, what's the deal? And he said that it matters how long the carcass is hanging. He said, because like everyone in Iowa, like they know the farmer and then they know the butcher. So they buy the cow and then they go get it butchered at the locker. That's what you do in Iowa. And then when you move other places with like large grocery stores, they've already been processed somewhere else and shipped. So, and they don't like, so the meat will break down and tenderize and like as it hangs as a carcass. So my uncle he's like, I always tell them to make sure it hangs for 2 weeks. It sounds gross, but that really helps with like the beef to break itself down. And I think too, like that's maybe why some people are not, because I know people who don't tolerate meat, like they'll say it hurts their stomach, like carbs hurt my stomach. And I wonder if they're just not getting like a quality, you know.
Right.
Okay, so the last thing
we're still going. Sorry.
Well, we're already at an hour and a half, and we got to wrap things up.
And I like short ones too, and I'm like, I got questions.
Yeah. Okay, so last thing. So the way that we met, you told me about John Dee, the name John Dee, and not just the letter D, but D-E-E, like the famous John Dee, who was the astrologer for Queen Elizabeth I back in the 1500s. That's a name that runs in your family, and also the orphan train. So do you want to give us a brief rundown of what's going on with your family?
Yeah, so my dad is actually John, John Dee the third, right? So I didn't know who John Dee was until like a year ago, and then I heard you guys talking about it. So it was a synchronicity for me because I'm like, who is this John Dee guy? And then I was like, oh my gosh, it was crazy. And then I was like, that's my dad's name, and he's the third. So my dad's family came from Kentucky, and I was looking into like, when we looked into the history, it was like they were like notable Klansmen, which I think were really like Freemasons probably. But then like during the war, my grandfather left Kentucky to go to Baltimore because he was a really hard worker. He was a bricklayer. So he was laying bricks there. And then that's how my dad met my grandma. And they started having babies at like 15, 16. So they had 6 kids, like one after the other, and they would just like drop them off at the orphanage. So that's, my dad grew up in the same orphanage as Babe Ruth.
Wow.
And like, so one of his mentors, my dad's mentors, was Johnny Unitas was one of his mentors. And my mom like actually met him one time, and he's like, "Hey, John," like spoke to my dad, like knew him. And my mom's like, "I never believed him." And then, we actually met him. And then my dad actually played football for the University of Nebraska because he was sent to Boys Town when he was like 14. And then
that's the same Boys Town that, what was it? The Franklin scandal.
Yes. And then my dad ended up back in DC for law school, and then he was drafted, went to Vietnam. So my dad's had like this crazy life. And there's like a lot of
connections everywhere. The Catholic University in DC, Boys Town in Nebraska. His name's John Dee. He was an orphan. Johnny Unitas, Babe Ruth. I mean, there's a lot of different things already going on.
Another show.
Yeah, and then on my mom's side, her grandfather he immigrated from Ireland when he was like 8 years old, and they landed in New York, and then he was put on the orphan train and he was sent out to Iowa. And so I always ask my mom, like, did he ever talk about Ireland? Did he ever talk about like the train ride out? And she's like, no, he would never talk about it. She never like and I talked about my grandma, Margaret Jean. I talked about her with everything from her childhood. So I was like really surprised that they never got into that. And then
it was her husband.
What's that?
Was it her husband or her father?
It was her father-in-law.
Father-in-law. Okay.
Yeah. And then I was asking, so then I did some like genealogy research. I went into a couple of the databases to get health information to try to like hack my genes so I could get healthier. So like I did that 10 years ago. And then this is so funny. Like, so my parents are from like, my dad's family is from the East Coast. My mom's family is from Iowa. They got married in DC, like met in DC. But then when I looked at my genealogy, like, I think my parents are actually, this is like cringing to say this on a podcast in front of everyone, but I think my parents are like super distant relatives because they had so many relatives in common from both sides of my family in the database and the databases that I'm in, like multiple connections with like a first cousin of mine on my mom's side is related to my dad's cousins. So like that to me, like the orphan trains and all of this, like, where did the Irish come from? Like, what's going on with it? And I'm like 99% Irish too. So like, it's a very, very strange, my family is a very strange thing to me. Like, I'm trying to make those connections right now and trying to figure out more.
Yeah. And that's what the orphan trains are for. That's why kids are orphaned out, is because they are then given new last names. They're these bastard children that they don't know their father, and then they're raised by another father. The cucking that goes on in these elite circles, Freemasonry, and whatever secret societies are out there. That's really it's inbreeding in a way that people don't know that it's happening to keep the bloodline going, and then circumstances just put these two people together so that then they have a child, and then it turns out they're related. I mean, it's probably more common than anyone cares to know about. I think so. Yeah, it's just, nothing is an accident in this world that we're in, and there's people pulling strings behind the scenes, and maybe they're not even people, but energies that are pulling strings behind the scenes that are putting things in place. And, God is using it all for the good, but when we look at the surface details, it can be sketchy, and it can be very strange and coincidental, synchronistic, and all that.
Amen.
So Mimi, did you have any final questions for Katie before she gives her information?
I just had more questions about food.
Okay, well, maybe we'll have to do
anytime. Call me, message me anytime.
I wanted to know your opinion on pork, really, because Todd had a little experience that has turned him off to pork. So
I don't love it. I'm not gonna
Yeah, well, that's what Jesus cast demons into.
Yeah.
I think that it wasn't even pigs then. I think they were the boars, wild boars that the demons were cast into. I think the pigs we have today are a combination of the fallen angels mixing the DNA of humans with the boars to create a pig, which is why they line up so much with humans, that they can grow body parts and so on and so forth. And then when I was in Virginia, there was a Route 666 that was connecting Route 10 and Route 10, and it was only, like 0.66 miles long, this Route 666. And there were only 2 businesses or whatever on this road, and it was a cemetery right next to a Smithfield pork packing plant. So
look at her face.
Yeah, so I was like, nope, I'm not eating pig anymore. That's just
it's not.
I
not
mean,
happening.
the first time I heard of anything like that was actually from my husband, because that happens in Mexico. So like it was well known to be like the cartel will do that, and they're very demonic and satanic.
And they pretend to be Catholic, or maybe they really are Catholic.
It's like
but they're
a
just...
fried green tomatoes type deal.
Yeah. So that actually, his family was talking about that one time and telling they would not eat meat because, and I was like, why is your mom not eating meat? And I was judging, tell her to eat the meat. And he told me why, and I was just like, oh my gosh. So then I was like, thank God we don't live in Mexico, but I think it happens everywhere, honestly. I think that's why for me, it's super important to know your farmer and your butcher.
Right. And definitely don't eat fast food. Definitely don't eat fast food. Okay. So do you want to let the audience know where they can find you?
Yeah. So I'm on Instagram. It's rhythm_nutrition3. And then my website is rhythmnutrition.net.
All right. So final question for you. It's how I like to go out with all the podcasts. What is your go-to grounding technique in this place of forcing us to eat these bad foods and telling us that these good foods are bad for us? How do you stay grounded and understanding what you're supposed to do as a human?
So I am big on like 2 main things. I do a lot of Epsom salt baths with baking soda. So I do that.
Combine?
What's that?
You combine the 2?
I do. Yeah.
Okay.
So I do that like as often as I can, and then I try to get as much sunlight on me as possible without glasses or contacts. And then the big thing that I try to do is I try to the most present that I ever am is when I'm looking into the eyes of my kids and hearing them and seeing them and just admiring them, like the gift that it is of being a parent. I try to stay present as much as possible. That's when I'm the most present, is when I can focus on my kids like that.
Well, I love that. And
that's why I love the baby so much.
Yeah. And I am sure after an hour and 45 minutes here that you can't wait to get back to your children. So we want to... No, this was a great conversation. You brought a lot of knowledge here. In nutrition, and also, some interesting stories that you've experienced, and God is definitely with you. Those stories in Denver, we never got to touch on that, but that is just some incredible things that happened, and God has always been with you. And I'm glad that my podcast has been able to bring you peace and our conversations and all. I'm so thankful that you're a Patreon member and that we interact all the time. And you're in the Bible study, you're a part of that, which we'll be doing later tonight. So just thank you for everything. And without your support, we wouldn't be able to reach as many people as we do. So thank you so much.
Well, you guys have no idea how you are. You have no idea what you're doing. Okay.
No, we have no idea.
I definitely have no idea what I'm doing.
Sometimes you won't know until you get to the other side.
That's right.
Yeah, that's right. All right. Well, thank you so much, Katie. We'll say goodbye to the audience. Everyone, make sure you stay tuned for the outro. All right. Welcome to the outro, everybody. So thank you for sticking around and listening to our analysis. We'll try to keep it short since the interview was a little longer than it has been. We don't want to be too long on the outro here. we would like you, since you are still here, if you haven't done so already, to please like, comment, share, subscribe, rate, and review, whatever it is you can do to help support the show. It would greatly benefit us, and we would greatly appreciate your support in that manner. And make sure you go check out the guest website and social media if you haven't already, rhythmnutrition.net, or her Instagram, which is at rhythm_nutrition3. So go check all that out. If you want to financially support and partner with the show, patreon.com/goodnessoverdarkness. And there you can get access that you can't get anywhere else. So now we can get into the breakdown of the show a little bit. Mimi, you had still more questions for our guest, but we'll have to bring her on at some point again to cover all this nutrition stuff.
Yeah.
So
I think I have many, and I have answers to my own questions. I just kind of wanted her take on my questions. So
can you get in the screen a little bit?
Sorry, I'm trying to be comfortable for the baby. I'm not really worried about what people see. He's super comfy, and if I move him, I feel like he's gonna cry. And we don't want that.
No, he hasn't cried the whole time.
I
He's been
relate
so
to
good.
Katie in so many ways, from being raised in a Catholic family.
You guys are like the same age.
And I love what she says about she feels like she had this extra layer of protection. And thinking about it, I honestly feel like she's onto something there. And I don't think it's because we were raised Catholic or because we went to certain schools. I think it's because of our grandparents. Because I say this because as a grandparent now, I have different knowledge that I didn't have as just a regular parent. I think that our grandparents get to the point where they solely focus on praying for their children and their children's children. And I think that's where the extra layer of protection comes from. I don't necessarily think it's where we went to school or where we were raised or whatever. I really think it has to do with something not genetically. What's the word I'm trying to think of? Through our grandparents. I mean, I think they pray for our extra protection.
That's interesting.
I really do, because we all get in these things where we have these internal battles with the way our parents raised us, or our parents versus our grandparents, who we just idolize in a way, who show us a different kind of love and who understand us more. And I just think that has to do with where you are in life. And I've said it before, I've done work with a hypnotist on, just working through some issues I had with my own parents. And the answer was really what she said. And it was, they don't know what they don't know.
Right.
Your parents don't know what they don't know. And then as you keep on living and become a grandparent, I'm sure my children think that my mother is, the best grandparent. Just like I thought that her mother was the best grandparent. So I think it has to do with our grandparents. And I know that I pray for my new baby grandson every day.
Yeah.
And I know that I didn't pray for my children every day. So I feel like there's something there.
Yeah, that's a really good point, that there is extra love being put out into the universe for you, and therefore it was protective, and what we ask for we receive, and it's not necessarily in the way that we think we're going to receive it. Just like what she told us stories about Denver, she never imagined that she would need protection from those two scenarios. I mean, that's some wild stuff. So
it extends out to me to, like, when I mentioned that I have siblings who have lived a different life, but then I sit back and think, well, when did my grandparents pass away? When did that protection stop?
Yeah, that's interesting. And I did want to correct something I said in the show. I said my daughter's mom went to an all-girls school. She didn't. It wasn't all girls Catholic school. It was, I think, it was girls and boys, and she switched back and forth between sometimes public school for like a year or two, and then the Catholic school for a year or two. So it wasn't, the same exact scenario, but it is close.
Excuse me.
It is a close amount.
It's just interesting stuff I've been thinking about the past couple of days. Connections I'm making.
Yeah, well, you have a new perspective now as being gammy yourself, so
Yeah, I'm very much more retrospective. Like I'm going way back and thinking about things way back and how they relate to now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
it's good talk.
Yeah.
And I really hope that your mom gets in touch. I think that a lot of her inflammation and things like that can very much be solved with removing certain foods from her diet. 100%.
Yeah.
100%. 110%.
Yeah, I do too. Well, hopefully she'll take advice from a dietitian. A fan of the show, a dietitian.
Yes.
That would be really great. And anybody, if you guys, food shortages are coming. That's what the resident in the White House said, that food shortages are coming. So if you want to get a food forest, I suggest you do
We can
it.
hook you up.
Yeah, I suggest you spend the money on it if you have it available to you, because there's not going to be a way to guarantee that you're going to be able to get food in certain places if things keep going the way they are. And I'm not here to push fear or anything. Everybody knows that Mimi and I have been in the works for a food forest of our own for a few months here. And we're greatly appreciative that we could become ambassadors and be affiliated with Food Forest Abundance. So if you guys want to get your own, in order to make sure you have your own food, go ahead and use the promo code GODCAST. It'll greatly help the show.
Yeah, now we're moving along with installation and everything, but you don't have to do that. You can get just a blueprint where they can kind of plan out what plants can be planted with other things to kind of work with one another, and you can do the installation yourself.
Right.
But they have such great knowledge on what plants pair well with other plants, or can cover each other, or can help each other grow, where they need to be placed. I don't have all that knowledge. My thumb has been black for a long time, and I'm really trying to change it to green. So I'm working slowly to do that. And so we are going through with the installation to get that part taken care of, because I don't think I could do that just yet.
Yeah, and they try to get the cheapest from local sources around. They've been growing our stuff for a couple weeks now in
Papa
greenhouse.
Mario grows all the most of the smaller plants he grows in his greenhouse. So I know that they're well taken care of.
Yeah, and if you guys want to partner, be a cooperative partner, which is like landscaping, doing the installs, you can also do that, and I'll have a special link for that as well. If you guys want to get involved. So just, go down in the description and click on that and get this. We want everyone to be able to have their own food supply. We don't want anyone relying on anyone else. And of course, you have to rely on your neighbors a little bit here and there. Like Katie was saying during the episode, you want to get things locally grown. You want to know the farmers and all.
Yeah.
So if you're not in an area that's out of the city, I suggest you try to do so, and you try to acquire some land so that you can build food and feed yourself. I mean, everyone talks about how much better the food tastes when you grow it yourself. So really, even if you're not doing from Food Forest Abundance, go check out somewhere to figure out how you can start to plant your own food, get seeds buy fruits, buy vegetables. A lot of them have seeds in them. Take those seeds and plant them and start building up a garden of your own.
I agree. There are plenty of ways to even do small container gardens on little tiny patios in the city or in windowsills. There's just so many options. I encourage everybody to get their hands dirty.
Yeah, be careful out there with everything that's going on.
I wish he would open his eyes to say hi to everybody, but he just still in sleep phase.
Yeah, he was so good. He
very
yelled out
good.
twice during the episode, but that's it. He's such a good baby. I call him Easy Ezra.
Easy Ezra, yeah.
Yeah. All right, so make sure you go check out my website, emmanuelkingman.com. If you guys want to be part of the Bible study, send me that email with the subject link Bible study, and you can be part of it. I don't think that we have anything else. I do want to close with a prayer. So here we go. Dear God, thank you for blessing us with life on this wonderful day. Thank you for blessing us with all of these opportunities, all of these connections that are being made, the friendships that are being deepened, the understandings that are taking place, the love, peace, and happiness that is occurring from doing all these different things, like having this conversation and putting it out for the public, all the people that are then healing and bettering themselves and benefiting from it. Thank you for providing us with the opportunity to do this. And we want to ask that anybody who's listening to this, please give them extra guidance and protection in where we are right now in life, that everything seems to be a little unstable at the moment. If you could help everybody listening to these words stable themselves and become one with you in love and peace and understanding, then that would greatly benefit the entire world. In Jesus Christ's name we pray. Amen.
He smiled.
Aw.
I hope we got that on video at the
Yeah.
end. We'll have to double check. But
Yeah,
he
well, yeah,
smiled.
it should be. All
I don't know
right.
if he was blocked by the microphone, but he got it right at the right time.
All right.
All right.
Well, that's going to do it, everybody. Thank you for stopping by, and we'll see you on the next one. Bye.